All right, Jess, anything you want to say before we jump in here?
No, I think, oh, and, invite a friend. Because I know all of you know where the mugs.marketo.com pages are and you're here. But I encourage you to bring your friends, encourage a friend to sign up so that they can stay up to date on kind of all of the mugs that are out there now. And it's, the silver lining to the pandemic is that access to so many mugs, because they're essentially all virtual now, that you have access to. And so, yeah, friends don't let friends not join us.
I was kind of hoping people would bring their execs to this one, because I think the topic here, one of the reasons Jess and I were talking about it and wanted to kind of chat through this is there's been so much, I think, confusion across levels of the marketing org, both in marketing ops, but also, in terms of how leadership talks about this particular topic, that it is sometimes helpful, and hopefully that some of the higher level information can be distributed out if there's something that you feel would be helpful for your teams, obviously. But this is a topic that it does go beyond marketing operations by itself. A lot of teams, executives, leaders talk about intent, and they conflate a lot of the concepts surrounding the topic. So, it's not just the Marketo user base that can benefit from this info.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we want to provide for you to walk away from is how to communicate intent and what MOPS do, or what typically MOPS is doing. But it's actually more about what marketing and sales. And this is an opportunity for you to add value to your company, as well as as well as be able to communicate with executives about the impact that you can make with intent. And so you'll walk away with the reason why this is top of mind, I know Max has used intent. We're like knee deep in it right now. Nate's on the call. He's actually the one on my team that is actually doing a lot of this and working with our stakeholders. So he's a person that you can then ask, but there's a lot of confusion within our company and how we communicate to our marketers and stakeholders and to executives about what intent is, how you should use it, how you can maximize it, and what it doesn't do. And so that's something that we struggled with, but it's taken a while for us to be able to communicate that. So we thought we'd just kind of share our learnings, my learnings from F5. What we've probably done? We didn't do introductions. We just kind of assume everybody knows who we are, Max.
You're right. Here we are. This is us. For the folks that have been here a while, you know who we are. If you've gone to the Adobe Summit as well, you may have seen the session. Jess and I are both in positions that span both operations and analytics at this point. So we have a lot of kind of exec leadership interaction, and all these topics, whether it's navigating the promotion cycle or intent, if you have any questions about, your specific use case, if you're not comfortable, raising your hand or speaking up in this session, you're also more than welcome to reach out to either of us on the various Slack communities that exist out there. And we're happy to provide our 2 cents on what you may be dealing with.
Yeah. Ready.
Yeah. And I'll say it again, Jess and I, we want folks to participate in this conversation too. It's not just a present out from us about, how to perfectly handle intent. If you've got experience using intent, if we don't mention particular vendors that you use, we would love to hear it. Jess and I want to learn how other people are using intent effectively, or the challenges you're running into. So don't hesitate to speak up. It's a group, not just a webinar. So we want to hear your guys' voices.
And we take it more like a fireside chat. We're not, this for us is more a fireside chat. If we were in person, we'd all sit around a circle and we'd have, marshmallows and maybe.
All right. So I think that we wanted to level set about what intent is. There are kind of multiple subsets, multiple cohorts of intent, and folks get confused about these different types of intent. So the first thing we wanted to do was kind of chat through the various types of intent that are out there, see if you all agree or disagree with how we've categorized these things, get your feedback as well. And then also just talk about how to use this in practice and some kind of critical areas that you can apply intent to in your org.
And maybe this is something that is review for some of you, but it also might be a different way to explain it to your stakeholders. So how, like, the words that you use and how you use it, because there's some times where I've explained this like 5 times in a meeting, and like 6 months later, the light bulb finally that finally lights up for some folks.
Yeah.
So when especially with a lot of vendors that sell intent data or provide intent data, we use the same word intent, but there's account intent and person intent, and those are two very, very different things. And I think a lot of times for the marketing stakeholders that we have at F5, they don't realize, oh, it's just intent, but they don't really understand that there's actual difference between intent. And so that's why this is a way that we've level setted with our stakeholders about what the differences of intent was. Max, you want to walk us through those?
Yeah, I think, again, I keep going back to the kind of exec narrative where we're deep in these conversations right now, where our CEO and our CMO are like, we need to leverage intent more in our follow-up. Like, why did they get to what they got to? Why are they exploring what they're exploring? And use that to kind of craft our marketing strategy. But they forget that there's broader intent that's at the account level, which is on the left here, obviously. And, that's based on, reverse IP information, domain, mapping, and doesn't, necessarily tie back directly to an individual that we might be trying to send communication to, or a specific person we're trying to retarget, on ad platforms or something. And so sometimes it's hard to connect account to what we're doing. Like, if you're marketing to people in Marketo and only half of them are directly tied to an account in Salesforce, but your intent data is tying to the account, you might not be able to hit all the people you want to hit. And so it's important to make sure that they understand that there's a difference between the account showing intent and engaging with, topics of interest related to your company, and then individual people that you've identified or that are being identified through that intent process, engaging with keywords and content. So you've got higher level account intent without specific personally identifiable information, and then you've got actual individuals that you're able to tie intent back to.
Those are two very different things. So when you're doing like vetting vendors and things like that, it's really important to ask those types of questions. Like when you're saying intent, what does that mean? I usually like to give use cases like, okay, someone from Wells Fargo is searching on security architecture infrastructure. We sell security products, right? Like Wells Fargo is, but I don't know who. So a lot of times in the past couple of years, when people try to run like campaigns or SDR follow-up, it's like, that's account intent means someone at that company is looking for it. And if you want, let's take it down from a MOPS level to nerd out about what does that mean. So typically several vendors, and you can ask when you're talking to the vendors, like, how do they calculate account intent data? So it's like usually a 15-week look back of like, is that IP, is that account from a reverse IP domain lookup in the network of millions and millions of web pages that provider is contracted with? Are they 15-week look back and looking at the baseline of people searching on a particular keyword normalized to their company size, right? Because you can imagine if you get 2 IP addresses or 2 pings off of a small company versus 2 pings off of like an enterprise company, that's going to be different. So I typically ask, like, I assume that you're normalizing based on the company size. And then they take the 3-week look back. 3-week is your numerator, 15-week is your denominator. And if the 3-week is spiking higher over the 15-week, then that's where that account is, the terminology is like surging, or you're seeing increase in activity for that particular keyword. So different vendors are going to have different scales or scoring. Like someone will say this is a low, a medium, or high. And so if we get back kind of to the MOPS level of like, what does that mean? So when you're talking about vendors, I think it's important from a MOPS perspective to kind of go into like, well, what does that mean? How should I be, because that'll help you interpret like how you should be utilizing that data from an account perspective. From a person.
It's also just a good note too that you mentioned like keywords. Also just good to level set up front with again, your internal teams, like intent isn't just like a, plug in, turn on situation. I mean, we all know that with every single tool in MOPS, but you do have to put thought and effort into what intent actually means for you, whether it's at the person or the account level. Like, what specific things do you consider worth notifying your company about? So you have to put in that kind of pre-work with your leadership team, with whoever needs to be involved in kind of the keyword conversation as well. It's not just something marketing ops does in its own world.
Right. And I think part of the difference is like with intent, with person intent, right? Like people understand. I've had some people get confused, like, well, is that someone on Google searching for something? And it's like, that's not it. It's the page they were visited, that they were cookied, that was tagged with this particular keyword. And so getting to what's helpful for how we use it to explain it to our stakeholders is to get very specific around the use case, right? So that they can visually grok what is happening. I'll actually say, it's like, okay, John went to a website, he's from this company, and kind of walk them through so they can really grasp what's actually happening. Because when it comes to person intent is actually something completely different, right? Person intent is going to a vendor site on pages that they own, right? Like Trust Radius, G2 Crowd, Tech Target. Those are Tech Target properties, their site, they're the publisher. It's not a relationship with third-party media partners and understanding their network. So it's a completely different thing. It's the G2 Crowd or the Trust Radius, it's their property. And it's, Sun going to that page, looking for a solution about XYZ. That is in itself, Sun is showing intent on trying to solve XYZ problem. It has nothing to do with, do they know, the company that you're with? And it's completely different than account-based data. Great, next.
Yeah. And so what Jess mentioned about kind of third-party platforms, in addition to account versus person level intent, is the company out there or unidentified people at a company out there researching in your space, or is an identified individual researching in the space. There's also, where is that signal coming from? I think, a lot of folks forget that, like, your website is an intent provider. Like, you're able to see, people are engaging with your forms and your content on your website. That's kind of on par with how people go engage with content on a third-party site, right? They're accessing your content for a reason. And also, if your web team is capable of supporting reverse IP, identification, there's several tools out there that can do that. Again, via your website, you can look at what pages companies are visiting, what they might be interested in, and retarget or work on lead gen programs against those accounts. Based on your first party website engagement, in addition to working with third parties, where you have to, I think you mentioned like Tech Target, Jess, where you have to have an account as a user. You have to have given Tech Target your information. They know who you are, and then that information is passed to whoever happens to be contracted with Tech Target. So that's very different from first party intent. And again, you can have account level intent or person level intent on those third party vendors, just like you could with your first party intent. So it's important to understand that there are like multiple factors at play. It could be, account level intent on a third party platform. It could be account level intent on a first party platform, person level intent on first party, person level on a third party. So you can like mix and match these things. They're different things that you have to scope out and understand with your vendors, and also with the people who are asking you to work through intent projects and leverage it in your marketing.
Well, we've got a great question in the chat. How do I map account intent to person intent? And can you suggest some tactics or tools? Well, that's actually really interesting, because and I've got Nate on the call who's doing this on my team. So we use Demandbase for account intent, and we use Tech Target for people intent. And what we're doing is we're actually using the combination of the two, which is, and they're different, right? They're like, as we explained on the previous slide, those are very different information. So, and this might kind of get into kind of the use cases that we're doing, but we can talk about it now. Which is, so if we have so for example, like we have a set of ICP customers or target account lists or ABM, or like, these are the accounts I don't want to go after. I know I want to go after these accounts. So there's a couple of things that we do, which is we look at, and for the demand base on the account intent data, it's like, okay, I have this 100 accounts. are any of these 100 accounts showing any intent? Are they surging? I don't know if that's just a Bambora term or is that just a general term? I don't know anymore.
No, I think that's a general term. Yeah.
Is it general term now? Okay, because like Bambora used to have surge. So I've used Bambora at like a bunch of different clients or a bunch of different companies before. But anyway, we use demand based. And so we look to see in a particular time frame, in the last 7 days and the last 30 days, is there anyone, is there any account, is the accounts that we're interested in surging? And that's one aspect. And then we use TechTarget from a complementary fashion and saying, okay, of the accounts that we're interested in, are there any people actually from those accounts that are also looking at it? So we do kind of like an intersection or a donut, right? Like one is a subset of the other. TechTarget may have some of the, right, but they're looking at completely different like properties, right? The data is completely different, but like you can combine them and like if there is the intersection, I mean, that to me is gold, right? Because you're also, that company is also surging across the interweb, the whole universe of the web, or not the whole, but you know, whoever's in their media, like millions and millions and millions of websites. And then also, they're also happening to go to TechTarget and looking for keywords that you have designated that are interesting to you, that have not. Now, actually, you know, you throw in a third thing, which isn't quite intent, which is content syndication, which is they're searching around stuff that you're interested in with your content on a third-party site. So, you know, TechTarget also does content syndication as well as a bunch of other vendors. And so I've actually done the intersection between person level intent data and content syndication, because that to me is like, wow, they must be really searching and trying to solve whatever problem because they're on a TechTarget website, searching for things I'm interested in, nothing to do with our company, but they're also on a third-party website looking at, you know, my content, my ebooks and stuff like that. It is, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I see that question, the follow-up. It depends on your ability to integrate systems, basically, right? Like you could pass information, you know, if you have the systems in place between, you could have a center point and pass information directly from your intent vendor through to a more lead gen centric vendor or something. Or one of the examples that is on a later slide is, so if you're trying to, you know, so there are kind of two things that I understood from the first question you asked. Like if you're just trying to map, like literally stamp account intent to the person level, that can be done with kind of basic like Salesforce platforms. Like if your sales team uses like lean data for routing for leads and contacts, you can create matched fields that can then stamp in account information to leads and contacts. But that's not necessarily like, again, that's where you don't want to conflate the account intent with the person intent when someone's looking at that lead. But what you could do is, you know, one of the examples we give later on is Marketo's ad bridge function. If you're trying to leverage your account data to, you know, to go and target or retarget people, or, you know, generally use people, you know, that exist in your database and retarget them on other platforms, you can kind of use Marketo in some cases as a center point to push retargeted lists out to other platforms and work to further engage leads. So it can be done manually. You know, you can export lists of surging accounts and pass those off to vendors manually. But, you know, you can also integrate those systems if you have the resources to do so.
Oh my God, I love these questions because I'm like, all right, this is where we get to nerd out. And you know what's hilarious? One, today is my day off and I'm spending with you guys. Two, in 2 hours, I'm about to meet with Demand Base because I'm about to do a recorded webinar for them. And there's like a lot of good Demand Base questions. So maybe I'll do a webinar for Demand Base. But no, this is exactly the use case that we have. And so I've done it before and I don't recommend it. Of course, today is the day that they're cutting the grass in my backyard. So, so I'm guys going to the lawnmowers.
We can't hear it. You're all good.
Okay, great. Okay, great, awesome. Oh, so what I've done in the past before that has not been effective is to take the surging account level data, put it on a Marketo custom, because this is how Bambora does it, or used to do it. Was like you put it on a custom object, a Marketo custom object on the person, and then send it over to Salesforce for like the BDRs to do something with. And that was, I've done it at like maybe 5 different clients, and it was always an epic disaster, right? Because it's not that person that is surging, it's just the account, right? But so like V2 with demand base and TechTarget and intent data and account intent data, We're actually doing this right now, so I'm super excited about it. So it is, well, I mean, is it manual? Okay. So this is what we do. We take the intent data, the account intent data, we utilize that data inside demand base, right? So inside demand base, you can see, right, like if you have your account list, right? So in demand base, and this was like the aha moment for me for using demand base and thinking about account and switching from Marketo land to like demand base, because it's the account specific piece of it. And we have the AVX cloud, which used to be Engagio, and that's the thing that like we like that is gold in terms of allowing MOPS to show impact. Maybe we need a separate webinar for that one. But what we do is the denominator in demand base is accounts. I know that sounds really like obvious, but it didn't click for me because we were so used to living in Marketo. We're so used to living in lead object. Your denominator and how you create your smart list is all around accounts. So you start with the smart list on accounts, and then you layer all the account data on top of it. So you can start with a predetermined ICP. These are the things I care about. Are the accounts surging? Or you can do the flip and say like, give me the accounts that are surging on blah. So you start with that. But then let's see, so the question is, but how do you use the intent data from demand base to Marketo to run campaigns? Aha. So it's different than what you would normally do, which is typically, right, we would go attach the intent data to the people, and then we would go run those accounts. So what we do instead, and Nate, you're going to have to keep me honest because you're the one who's running it in demand based Marketo, right? Like, so we start with, like, is basically, I'm thinking what we're doing with APCJ, right? What are we doing now? We have the account, and then we do different marketing to them. So like, depending on where stage, and this has to do with account journeys, right? Depending on where they're at. So like, so say, for example, we have people that have intent. This is my lily pads, right? So if we have accounts that are doing intent, and then you can look to see, did they make it to the next lily pad, which is, are they on our website? If they're not on our website, then we want to get them to the website. How do we do that? Then you send those accounts back into Marketo, and then we'll go down in a second, to try to get them to the website. You can do that by a bunch of different campaigns. But then you're like, okay, I want to move these 50 accounts that are showing intent that aren't on our website, and I want to get them to go to our website. So then you send those back into Marketo. Either you have the right people, right? And you run that campaign in Marketo with those people that you have, or, hey, I don't have the right people. You can go get those people. And that's where you can get the people intent data, or just people in general, either or. It's like, you got to go find the right people. But then you can move them to the next lily pad, which is then, I want to get them to engage. Well, if they have intent and they are already engaged, that's like great to be able to be like, they're surging right now. It's a time thing. So intent is all about time, right? It's about immediacy, right? Like, because if they're surging right now, you can insert yourself and move them to the next lily pad, like right now, because there's a time component to it, right? So if they're showing intent and they're already on your website, then you probably want them to do some hand raiser things. So what can you do to get them to the hand raiser things? So Nate and I have been working actually with the VP of demand base, who like, they drink their own Kool-Aid, right? And so like, what do you want them to do? Oh, well, people who are hand raisers, like they really love demos. They really seem to be associated with the Gartner report. Those are the things that, so then if you have people that are surging, or accounts that are surging, and those people on those accounts are on our website, but they're not doing anything else, they're not MQL, they're not in a meeting, then how do I get them to want to do a demo? Then that might be a different nurture, a different campaign, or a different like roundtable thing. Nate, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, to answer the question of what do we use that intent data for, from demand base to Marketo. I think when people get intent data, the first thing I want to do is use the actual individual terms to have the salesperson know what is this account searching for and personalize that outreach. But a really simple use case to start with, and this is what we do in demand base and using Marketo as well, is just to build it into your score. So with demand base, we have an account score, which is just like a person score, but at the account level, and is rolled up from person level data and an honest account data. So the intent data that we get from demand base, which is that account level data, we score that and add it to the score of the account. And then the person level data, which we get from Tech Target, we put into a Marketo program, and then that gets scored as well. So that all gets rolled up to the account level. And then we use that account score to then push people into different stages, or then have marketers look at it and see the different stages that they're in to then have their campaign data. So that's one way. And then you can build it into your lead score as well by just as another factor. So we typically have demographic scoring and then behavior scoring. Bringing in intent scoring as its own thing, then can just add another piece to that balance of scoring. So rather than really using individual keywords and trying to create a complicated system based on that and let the sales team try to figure that out, just building into your score makes it much more operational into the processes that you already have as a marketing team. So I think that's the intersection that we use right now, and is a really good first use case for intent, rather than trying to get really complicated with it or create some new processes just based on one thing surging or one account surging.
So a couple of good questions in there. Catherine, could you clarify in the chat like why they wouldn't be marketable in Marketo if we purchased them, whether it's like, compliance reasons, GDPR or something like that, or something else. And then Kelly just asked for Jess and Nate, if the record is a lead, not a contact, how are you tying that intent data back to the account when it comes to like account level scoring like that?
Demandbase has a lead to account matching. So there's a Demandbase will do some fuzzy matching.
Okay.
And yeah, I think the other tools do that as well, like 6 Sense, other ABM tools, lead to account tools will that integrate with intent or have their own intent will do that automatically.
Yeah, Kelly, I think like Kelly's on my team, and Kelly's running some of our intent projects right now. Kelly, I think in our case, because I don't think our current solution will do that, we would rely on our other lead to account matching option, which would be our routing option, which is not ideal. We would rather the solution just do it, but that would be kind of our fallback.
Gotcha.
Catherine, I don't want to skip over your question. Do you want to, oh, there we go. Okay. Assuming the records are purchased in a Zoom info type vendor is against Marketo's terms of use and purchase contacts in Marketo.
I am not a lawyer and I do not play one on TV. So let's put the disclaimer out there. I can tell
and you shouldn't be either, Catherine, by the way. Just if you're ever asked to be the lawyer for marketing, you're not that.
I can tell you that from experience at multiple companies that there are many companies that purchase Zoom info and then market to them out of Marketo. That is a legal call. That is company to company. I've seen some companies go, no, you can't purchase. And I've seen some companies go, yes, you can. So there is no, so you can. But like, so let's say you want to run them out of outreach. What do you want to, let's see, hold on, for those purchase contacts that you can't market to, are you working with sales team to do outbound?
I would say one way you could approach that, Catherine, is still like retargeting on digital channels, right? Like just because you just because you can't market to them, like Marketo, if you're able to add them to Marketo but not communicate to them, you can still retarget them on other platforms. Marketo's ad bridge function will let you push those people, even if you can't email them, will let you push them over to LinkedIn, Google, Bing. I think there's some others as well. So you could still at least use them as target audiences on other platforms, even if you can't email them.
We use Demandbase's DSP, which I didn't know what a DSP was because I live in the Marketo land. But basically we do account-based retargeting of ads. So we'll take like for example, we'll take here's 100 accounts that are surging on topics that we're interested in. Let's just pretend we don't have any contacts, so we can't email them, and let's just pretend we can't buy any of them. So we'll use Demandbase's like ad targeting platform to like go and target ads specifically to those accounts. So we kind of use that. It's a different product of Demandbase, but we do that.
Demandbase, I would say, and I think it's a good lead into this slide. This is very high level, right? Like you have to do your own research to figure out what the fit is for your company. Demandbase, in my experience, has been my best option historically. It's not currently what we use. But in terms of what Jess described of taking the intent data, coupling that with your own database information, turning around and then targeting people all in one motion. Demand-based is very effective at doing that. Not perfect, but the most effective that I've personally seen. Some of these do one specific element of that, not kind of the intent, propensity, and lead gen motion all together in kind of a smooth way. But a lot of companies may not have the resources to go out and purchase something like demand-based. It's not the smallest of costs depending on your company size. So you may want to consider the manual options before you go out and invest that. Make sure that you can commit to that concept before diving into that huge MarTech implementation.
And there's some ways that you can use Marketo programs to kind of hack some stuff, right? Like you can use Marketo programs to bucket things, and then when you bucket them, right? Like so let's say you don't have the integration, let's say for other reasons, like you can just go and look at demand-based or look at the intent data and go back into your Marketo and be like, okay, give me company name is or SFDC account ID equals, and use some smart lists, and you can kind of hack it that way. Because I've worked at both startups and enterprise level companies. And again, we bought demand-based probably 2+ years ago, and I call it the Instapot that sits in a box that sits in your corner. And it was basically our Instapot that sat in a box for, I don't know, 2 years. And I mean, Nate's been on it for, I don't know how many months now, since December. And we're still just scratching the surface of how to use it. That's my demand-based webinar in 2 hours.
Yeah. And this is also not, I don't think this is not a comprehensive list of all intent vendors out there. There's one that I realized I'm missing, Lattice Engines, which is, I would say, it tries to do similar to what demand-based does, and it compromises on some things. But intent, propensity, and then serving up targeted audiences to other platforms. But it's good to know when you're going into conversations. Like TechTarget can do both, but it's going to be at a smaller scale than something like demand-based, especially you're gonna inherently have a smaller pool of people than accounts, because if people have to have signed up for the third-party platform as a research platform, there's going to be a much smaller number of people that do that than just accounts going out and researching on the internet overall. So, this is kind of a starting point, but definitely, consider what you're really trying to solve for. If it's lead gen, quickly, something like TechTarget is a really good option. If it's a longer term, account-based approach, you might want to consider something like demand-based as an option.
And we use the TechTarget person intent. We don't use the TechTarget account intent, right? I don't think we do.
No.
Yeah, we don't do that.
We do, and it is effective. Again, it's just at a smaller scale than something like demand-based or 6 Sense or something like that. It is really helpful. It does the same thing. It just gives you can go region by region, rep by rep, and it'll show them based on what they own or what patch they're looking in. Accounts that are showing intent, and then if it has related leads and contacts, then it will serve those up as well. But it's definitely not at the scale of something.
Do they?
Like
so is TechTarget account data? Do they have their when they're looking at the account data? Are they only looking at the TechTarget properties, or are they looking at the interweb, the way that demand-based and everybody else is doing it?
TechTarget properties.
Oh.
So again, really specific scale. Our order of operations with TechTarget at our company was essentially starting with lead gen and then getting into the account level intent, where I think a lot of people maybe sometimes will go the other direction. It's okay, let's start with the higher level account intent and then go the other way. So we have TechTarget on one hand, and then a separate tool with kind of higher level account intent that we use for other things. But it's kind of just by a product of how the conversation was approached years ago.
I learned something new, right? Because if TechTarget says, hey, I saw account intent data, and demand-based says, I saw account intent data, I can tell you that Nate and I have spent a lot of time unconfusing people, because there's a great example. TechTarget's account intent data is not the same definition as demand-based Bora, other people's account. And we haven't, I know demand 6 Sense and LeadSpace, they probably have other products. So they may have person intent data. I have no idea. So I'm curious if like this may not be accurate. And we may not have the latest thing. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there in case someone says, no, they have person intent data. But I think the key thing is, especially for us as MOPS professionals, is to really, when we're talking to the vendors, to ask like the definition and to be really crystal clear of like, okay, you're saying intent, but how are you gathering that data? What does that word really mean? And I think it's really our privilege and our responsibility to be the sanity checker internally for our company, to just I'm constantly, Nate and I constantly reminding them like, this is the definition of intent from this vendor, right? Like, I feel like we need to filter out, like, translate the bullshit.
Are there any tools? I'm curious, are there any platforms that folks don't see on this list that you all use for intent, either person or account or both? ZoomInfo, yep.
I'm curious to how ZoomInfo defines their intent, right? Because I know ZoomInfo from like, okay, we can buy leads, but I'm really curious how they define intent, right? Are they just doing what everyone else does? Also, what's interesting is, TechTarget bought BrightTalk.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, and that's, we've listed them separately because they're two independent cohorts of, users, but yes, co-owned now.
Right. So now they own BrightTalk, and BrightTalk is kind of that weird, well, I wouldn't say weird in a bad way, but like it's just BrightTalk is like, it's a community of videos, right? So they do sell organic, like there's organic leads that they sell you, there's the paid leads that they sell you, they run webinars, right? It's all kind of, because I guess the takeaway message is like, you got to get real clear on your definition. And everybody's kind of getting into the intent game. So
yep. I'd say too, like I remember, I was using this Lattice Engines platform. I don't know if anyone uses Lattice, but right. So in my last company, we actually had both Lattice and Demand Base, and it was just, I don't know why, but we had both. And Bombora ended up like ending its contract with Lattice. And so I think we've seen Bombora separate itself from some of these other vendors, become its own thing. And that's had to force some of these other vendors to figure out their own definitions of intent. So again, just underscoring Jess's point about, everything kind of used to align to things like Bombora in the past in terms of terminology and criteria, because a lot of vendors leveraged that as their intent kind of provider. But now everyone's kind of defining things differently.
Yeah. All right. Do you have some use cases?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. And to Mallory's comment, yes. So feel free to reach out to myself or Nate if you need a demand-based buddy, because we're good. We're like we're like 6 months into our, like, we're dusting off taking the Instapot out of the box. And like I said, honestly, the way that we've been doing it is we've been meeting regularly with with the VP of ABM and being like, okay, just go ahead and just teach us what we're supposed to do so we can accelerate getting the Instapot out of the box.
Yeah. So we had so we kind of split this into two different use cases, like some sales side use cases and some marketing side use cases. I think it's super important to, again, make sure that you're scoping out what you're trying to solve for with intent. Like, are you just trying to make your marketing more effective, or most likely you're trying to also serve your sales team, not just through your marketing efforts, but give them the opportunity to leverage this in their day-to-day as well. So what we have on here are some sales use cases. Jess, I think you may be leveraging the first one in your instance, if you want to walk through that one, or if you've run through that in the past.
Yeah, so we're solving for what, so like for accounts that we're interested in, we have our target ABM accounts, and Nate can keep me honest because it's not me that does the work. It's like if we have white space for people, then we'll go and acquire the people through the tech target, like people intent piece, like especially when it aligns. And the sales, I don't know, salespeople would like that. That's kind of our first space. Like, hey, we don't have the people that we want, but instead of just buying a bunch of names, it's like one step above, because they're actually looking, right? It's that timeliness. Intent is all about timeliness, and there's a time component to it.
Yeah. We're going through a full kind of like a reassessment of intent and propensity where, at our company, and we're having to try and figure out how to better manage the timeliness aspect of it. We've been super focused on kind of this propensity conversation. We have to solve for that, but intent is really the real time, signal that can help us as marketing or our sellers start the conversation. So the second line item there, about, as marketing, we can help alert our sellers to, to surges in intent signals, on our side. If they're not totally clear on where to find that in the CRM, we can alert them to that. Or, we've worked with our large enterprise team where we are to kind of be a proof point for us about why intent is so helpful. And they've seen a lot of success as we put together these lists that they revisit weekly to make sure that they catch, accounts that are consistently showing intent over the course of weeks and weeks and weeks. So, in addition to the white space, so the surging is the most kind of critical piece of this, and you want to leverage that however you can, whether it's on the marketing or helping your sellers in their day-to-day. Sorry, Nate, I think I cut you off earlier.
Oh, no, you didn't.
All right. And then the last one on here, I think, is kind of aligned to what we chatted about with some of the platform discussions about like how do you turn around and use this to kind of run your marketing programs, identify new accounts that may not be in your system, go out and leverage that on other platforms. Sorry, I cut another person off.
No, you mentioned propensity. Maybe that's our next account propensity, right? Because we use because I know a lot of these they kind of overlap, like a lot of functionality. Everyone kind of does a little bit of everything. So it's almost like as MOPs, we have to figure out the jigsaw puzzle of like how to assemble the thing, which vendor to use what for. For us, we use propensity. We've actually built, our data science team builds us a product recommender propensity, like the Amazon, like most likely to buy like product. But we also use Mintigo for our account propensity scoring, but that is different than like intent. They also have intent. We don't use, I don't know if they separate out the account. Oh yeah, they have account intent. We don't use their account intent. Their account intent data is like 5% of the calculation of our propensity model. So to me, 5% is not really, doing anything for the score, but we have account score through a propensity model separate from like the timeliness of intent.
Yeah.
Surging.
We should totally do a session on propensity and we probably each have some guest speakers we can bring. But yeah, I think the intent is real time, essentially. Propensity is less likely to change over time unless your criteria change. So we should do a session on that. I think it would be good to delineate the two for folks if that's interesting to everyone. We'll look to everyone else to tell us if we should talk about that.
Marketing.
What's some marketing use cases, Jess?
All right, so like we kind of touched on it, which is like targeting ads based on the fact that either the and this is where you can leverage account intent data and people intent data a little differently, right? Like, so if you know the person, you can target that person on LinkedIn, right? Or, you can target the ads, even if you can't email them, or you can email it. But then with the account intent, you don't know who the person at that account is, looking at, but you can also then just target the ads of that account, using various different platforms in order to do that. You can also do, the marketing activities or campaigns based on the information that they're in this particular point in time. The account is doing something. That's your intent-based email nurtures. Those, if you have account intent, those aren't that. I mean, those are really a hit or miss. Especially like we're interested in enterprise accounts, and so I mean. Enterprise companies are really big. So the likelihood of you hitting the right person that is looking for that, I mean, that just means your targeting and segmentation and the data in your system needs to be super clean. So, that is a consideration. The other thing where marketing can be the hero is we talk, Max touched on it, right? Alerting sales when accounts are surging on a particular thing. That would be the people intent, identified people that show intent. And we also put in there, demand-based already does this already, but we also put in there like when people are doing things on our campaigns or on our webpage. So there's that first party intent, right? The intent being like, that's the stuff that we provide in Marketo. Demand-based actually can lump all of that together and we send it in a sales alert email. So like these people on this account in your territory that you're interested in, there's a section on like, okay, these companies have intent. You can combine the tech target people intent data by putting them in a Marketo program, changing the status. Because there's Marketo campaign activity against it, then it's going to pull into demand base into those email alerts. So you kind of a very simple way to be able to integrate that information back out into these alerts, right? And then like Max had talked about, incorporating intent into scoring in different ways and moving and using the scoring to do different things to them.
Yeah, I'd say we, and this is just our approach at Druva, is we've gone through, several discussions around like intent in scoring, and we have opted to not make intent part of our lead scoring. We've opted to make intent, at least the account level intent, right? Usually person level intent for us is tied to some sort of actual marketing engagement, right? So usually if that's the case, there's not really that much separation between the person level intent and the activity that's causing them to score up on our behavior scoring. But we've opted not to incorporate account intent into our scoring really for the time being. We've decided like, okay, let's keep our scoring primarily behavior based, a little demographic, and let our sellers navigate the account level intent once we get that person to them. And we still, we give them the option to engage with more than just our, qualified lead group. We segment kind of engaged leads and or cold leads if they need it by that intent to give them a starting point. But again, there's no perfect way to do this. And your sales team may decide that they don't think that account level intent necessarily makes someone a more qualified person. So just make sure you have that conversation and determine kind of where in the workflow account intent should fall compared to person intent. Person intent might already be something that's factored into scoring by virtue of that intent being tied to marketing behavior. So kind of map out what should contribute where and who owns what.
And I think and let me clarify too, because I think the words that matter, when I say scoring, I meant, and I think Nate also meant engagement.
Account scoring.
No, engagement minute score. Well, is it account scoring? Not, so in demand base with, Engagio, the ABX cloud, right, that we talk about engagement minutes. And for the longest time, and it literally just dawned on me like today, see, I'm learning something new. Because isn't engagement minutes the same thing as scoring? And it's actually not. Because the concept of engagement minutes in demand base in ABX cloud, aka Engagio, it has to do with like, there is a reference to time, like when it happened. Did it happen July 1st or did it happen August 1st? Versus when we think of Marketo behavior scoring, we're not tying it to a date in time. And so when we implemented engagement minutes, I'm like, oh, it's just another thing for scoring. And it's actually not. Because we'll give, Nate, what do we give? We give half a minute to intent. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, it's really low.
Right. But like the reason why we do it is because we want to stamp that engagement minute on the calendar. This is actually going to be our next blog. And I just thought of it, Nate, is the difference between engagement minutes and behavioral scoring is we want to stamp it on the calendar versus behavioral scoring. We're not stamping on a calendar. So 100% agree. And thanks for pointing that out, Max. We don't give behavior scoring points to intent. Like we want to actually give like actual marketing activities to it. We did it before and it was like a bad idea. But engagement,
I would say we used to do it too, and it got negative reviews. So we pulled it, right?
Same. So like learn from us, don't make that mistake, right? But we do engagement minutes because we can stamp it in time, especially at the tech target. You put it into a Marketo program, you don't give it a score, but you give it a demand-based engagement minute. It stamps it in time because remember, intent has to do with where you are on the calendar. And then so you can see, it's beautiful to see accounts or group of accounts to see their engagement go like this. So like if you come back from a trade show, now I'm just getting excited. Like come back from a trade show and then you can actually see of those accounts that attended your trade show, net new or existing that have known you, you can see their overall engagement minutes. Wouldn't you love to see like that intent go up across the web that they're searching for stuff, right? Like, so you can, it's just kind of looking at the data is a little different. Kind of, it's a mind twist. It's totally a mind. So,
I think one of the other things that I wanted to mention, oh God, was so this is, I think there's a lot of kind of caution here about alignment and, deciding where you score and what you score from. I think also just like accountability on the marketing side, when you're working with your stakeholders, make sure you're not just using intent to say you're using intent. Like if you're running intent programs or, say, our stakeholders are working with tech target around particular intent keywords, if that's going into follow-up marketing, make sure that you have a plan for following up based on intent. This is a huge gap that we've seen where, it doesn't necessarily mean sellers have to go keyword by keyword by keyword in their conversations and try and follow up that way. But if you're running an intent program and you're defining keywords up front, you're following marketing material and conversation would ideally be centered around the intent that person showed, not just like generic messaging, or else, you may as well just have not defined keywords to begin with. So I would also say that, make sure that you're pushing your marketers to not just do intent for intent's sake as part of their lead gen motion. Make sure that they have a follow-up strategy. How are we going to engage these people based on that intent, if possible, to get them to actually take that next step, next piece of content, next conversation. Marketing is very responsible for that, just as much as pushing sales to actually use it too.
And getting sales to use it, I've tried and failed many times. That's because we're just like, hey, they're searching these words, and you're like, the salesperson, like, they don't know what to do with it. So you have to be very prescriptive. And so a lot of times the vendors will allow you to do keyword clusters, but you also have to be very prescriptive of what they're supposed to do with it, right? So it's really important to get, again, that just echoes the alignment to get success. Because if they're not adopting it, you're not succeeding, right? You got to get sales to adopt it. That's winning. That's your KPI for winning, is that sales is adopting it and you're able to convert X number of accounts faster. Those are your KPIs. In order to do that, they have to adopt it. In order for them to adopt it, they have to know what to do with the information. Got to think through the whole process. Awesome.
All right. Well, we're at the hour, but if anyone, again, these were just some prompts. I know we're at the hour and folks are starting to drop off, but if anyone does have any, questions, either put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them, or if you've got any, feedback, not just questions, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and would love to hear, like, what's the one takeaway that you learned today that you found most useful, so that we can continue to make these mugs better for you all. So would love to hear, like, what's something that you learned today that you're like, I can take that nugget away. So, and yeah.
Everyone's very quiet.
I
know. It's scary to talk about intent. I don't want to acknowledge that we're not doing things right. Person intent is great. Yeah, good differentiation there. We'll send out the recording. So if you folks need to like screenshot any of that, or repurpose it in your context and help explain the difference between this for folks, should be helpful. Good to hear, Greg. That's good. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, go for it, Jess.
No, I was going to say, otherwise, Max and I are just going to go to lunch and we're just going to call it a user group now.
Yeah. All right. Last call for conversation. All right. Well, it seems like this was generally helpful, so we're glad to hear that. And again, don't hesitate to reach out on the Slack channels. Keep an eye out for follow-up with the recording, and thank you guys for participating. And we're going to try and get in a more regular cadence of doing this. We'll keep an eye out for ideas from you all. We really appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.